welcome to part 2. For the first half of this video, the link is in the description. In this video I'll be covering using the draw plate and finishing the end of the Viking knit chain. Enjoy! So I basically go until I can't really pull on this anymore. And now it's time for a splice. Just sort of open this gap a little bit bigger. Closed up on me there. So now you take your next piece. Some people do this a little bit differently, but my preferred method is to go through the gap that you just filled the other way, so that the end that you are going to stitch with is going the same way as the previous one. Then I bend the two end tails together with just a few inches sticking out. Then I bend them together and then bend them parallel to the stick. And then I can continue stitching with this this new length of wire. So then it's continuing to loop around and around with the wire. It's a very tedious process compared to making other types of chains, because this is basically literally knitting with wire. This process is very similar to loop and loop, which was used, I believe, by a lot of cultures used it, but some of the more predominant ones were the Greeks and Romans, to create a lot of their jewelry. But that one, instead of it going through the cross section like the Viking knit is, it goes through the loop section, and it just carries on that way, and around and around. This actually has a little more symmetry to it, because it's going through the cross section instead of the loop, because the loop it ends up being staggered a little bit. So now when you get back to where it's crossed from the splice, you want to carry under all of that wire and go around there, and that is your first round after. You want to go probably, I'd say, 1/4 of an inch or so past, and that'll be 3, 4, maybe 5 rows, depending on how many, the gauge of your wire, or how many stitches you want to do, feeling safe that these aren't going to come poking back through once you've put it through the draw plate. And because it's just stitched over and over and over, the kind of splice is very secure, and won't come undone, because you'd have to undo quite a lot of wire to be able to get it to kind of just unravel. If your ends do come through after you've put it through the draw plate, you can always use something like an awl or screwdriver or any other kind of pokey object to just poke them back in, bend them down inside so that they don't become any more of a problem. So once you've got the number of stitches you want over the splice, what I tend to do is bend the pieces up, do one final stitch that I don't pull completely tight before cutting it off. Then I just snip it just longer than that stitch will hold. Bend them back down, and then pull this so that it sits right on top, just to sort of keep them held in place firmly. And then keep going around until it's the next splice. And then with the next splice, I would, because you can see where the splice is fairly apparently, at the moment. What I tend to do is do one row past and keep doing that so that all the splices are dispersed evenly throughout the piece, instead of it just having, accidentally one row has all the splices in it. That can look a little bit ugly. It's hard, in the finished product, it's hard to see where the splices are, but if you look closely you can see it, and so if they're all in one row, it might be a little bit apparent. Once you have it the length that you need, it's time to run it through the draw plate. Keep in mind that it's better to make it longer because you can cut it down and maybe make multiple projects from it. You don't need to get it the exact length through the draw plate. I found that took quite a interesting calculation to get it to work properly, and it just was far easier to make a length of it and then cut it into multiple pieces. I chose to leave this one fairly short just for time's sake at the moment. So you take it through your draw plate, either the plastic one or the wooden one. I'm going to use the plastic just because it's a little bit easier. And you put it through the first hole, and I find it's easier to take something like this awl or pliers, the screwdriver, stick it through the hole in this to create almost a T-handle, and that way you can sort of just pull it through. And then you just keep going through the holes until you get down to the size that you want, and it just reduces it in size. And as you go, it makes the loops and everything more uniform and tighter together. And there are some people out there that actually put stones or beads inside, and they'll pull it through in both directions and actually trap that stone inside of it. To the best of my knowledge, at least in Viking lands, that wasn't done, but it's an interesting modern take on it. It may have been done in India, where this type of chain was actually found, giving it the other name of trichinopoly chain for where it was found. And keep going down, and it squishes it in diameter and actually makes it longer as well. And soon is where the T-handle part actually comes in handy, because it gets harder and harder to pull it through each consecutive hole. I believe this hole is about 1/4 of an inch. I think that would be the final size for this piece. As you pull it through and it gets tighter, it'll actually get a little bit stiffer as well. And if you go too much farther, it'll become too stiff to really be a useful chain. But as you wear it or you use it, it will loosen up a little bit and become a little more flexible and pliable. So the final step is to sort of trim it up and remove this end and put a little cap on it. So you can either unravel this to save that piece of wire for next time. It's a little bit tedious. At this point, I'm just choosing to just snip it off and then pull out these little loops that were formed by it. One of the pieces coming off is obviously going to be the tail from the start of the wire, which you can actually trim down. or just form a little bit of a loop in it and just shove it in the end and sort of squish all of that together to form kind of a blunt end on it. Same thing you can do here. Trim this off, bend it into a loop, shove it back inside there, and sort of just blunt in the end. Now, just to form use this wire to form the caps. There was actually one tool that I had forgotten at the beginning of the video, and it's going to be very hard for everybody to find, and that's a pencil or a pen or some other cylindrical object that's round about the size of your knit. So take a wire about 6 inches long, 8 inches long, depending on how long you want how many spirals around you want the cap to be. And then you're going to want one that's about 3 or 4 inches. So to form the cap on the end, you're going to need either needle nose pliers. It could be a Leatherman, could be any multi-tool or just regular old needle nose pliers, or a set of the scrolling pliers, which can be found at any store that sells jewelry supplies. So with the pliers, you're going to create a fairly tight loop in the end of the wire, and then you want to spiral around, getting larger, so that you can create a flat end to it, or you can create a cone end on it. Depends on what you want. And you're going to make that spiral the diameter of your knit. Such as this. And it could also help to put a little bit of a bend in it right at that transition point so that it's fairly centered on your wire. And you take it to your extremely hard to find tool here, and you just press it against it, and you wrap around it as tight as you can, as tightly as you can, wrapping this down. And as neatly as possible. And that leaves a bit of a tail. Just take it off of your cylindrical object, and you take your pliers, and just to finish that end, you bend it around so that it's just like a little hook. And you take this part that you bent into the spiral and just bend it down to form the end of the cap. And that's that. You can actually buy precast caps that have different designs on them that are basically a bead that has a hole in the end like this for the diameter of the wire, and then in this end it has the hole that's for the diameter of the knit. I prefer to do it this way because then I can make the chain a custom size for whatever the use is going to be, or whether I make it out of a thicker gauge of wire, and so it needs to be a bit thicker to really look good. So I'm not limited by the size of the caps that I have. So now to attach the cap to the chain, you take your smaller, shorter piece of wire, and you bend a little hook on the bottom of it. You then go down a few, maybe 1 or 2 stitches. You stick the hook into the chain, trying not to let it fall out when you let go. So into the chain. Then you take your cap and you slide it on so that the hole so the wire goes through the hole. Then you slide it up as tight as you can get it. As tight as you want it. It helps if the wire cap fits a little bit tighter than I have it. Then I usually just go about a finger width and cut it off. Then to hold it on without slipping, you can bend it at a 90-degree angle to create a loop, and then you just bend your loop on and force the end of it back into the hole so that it sort of pinches the loop. And there you have it capped off in a very secure way. From there, you can then attach bigger loops. Bigger loops of either thicker wire, or you can use this little hook to attach it to the pendant that you're putting on it, so that it has a loop that goes around to two pendants. One thing that I really liked doing when I made a bunch of these, I used to sell bracelets made of this, is to actually just create a little S-hook. An S-hook that will just hold, let's create a little S-hook that will slide through here, and then the other side comes around with the same kind of loop on it, and then to secure it you just slide that, or this can then hook onto a pendant ring. Any number of possibilities, any way that you can attach it with any kind of clasp. The S-hook is just a very simple technology that would work for the period. And that's it for basic Viking knit. There are more advanced techniques like double knit or triple knit, which are essentially 2 or 3 layers of knit in one, or captive objects within the knit itself. But those are more advanced and, to the best of my knowledge, not a period technique. So that's it for this tutorial. For the next tutorial, I'm going to let you guys choose between 2 different ones. I can either show you how to make these Viking-inspired spiral rings. Rings similar to these have been found in a number of finds, both Viking and around the world. Basically, it's a very very interesting technique from antiquity. Or I could show you my experimental take on Viking Age leatherwork. So if you have any questions about anything, leave it in the comments. And if you have a preference as to what I do for the next tutorial, please leave a comment as well. Thank you.